preferably or preferably? Which one's better? I mean, they're the same thing, just a better pronunciation. Test, check 1, 2, mic check.
You're good. I can hear you.
Waka, waka.
It's amazing that the weather changes so much that we had the AC on here and now we need the heat on. It's cold back here now.
I like it cold. Feels better to me. I'm a sweater.
You have a story of some sort to tell, you're saying?
I do.
Start with like once upon a time, maybe?
When I was a young boy. This is a series for financial advisors. We offer easy to implement marketing and practice management advice. This is the Stephen and Kevin Show. All right, so recently stayed at the Montage in Palmetto Bluff. Have you ever been to a Montage
Never.
property? All right.
Are there more than one?
Oh, there's a bunch.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a bunch. And I'll tell you, I think it is so much better than the Ritz-Carlton. And I know we've written books, and Matt Oxley talked forever about Ritz-Carlton experience. I feel like they take it to another level. Just the service and the overall experience, so much better. Now, this is a big, resort. So it's not just a hotel. It's like, miles of a resort, and you have to drive a golf cart to get to like your room and stuff like that.
So like Hilton Head area.
Yeah.
Plantation looking kind of place.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Spanish moss and it's beautiful, right? I mean, it's an awesome experience. But remember the Ritz-Carlton experience I told you about with the whole floss scenario?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I come back and I'm at the Montage. It's 11 o'clock at night or so, and I'm back in my room. And once again, I don't have any floss.
I feel like you're putting these hotels to the test.
I don't have any floss. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just like my Ritz-Carlton thing where I called and the guy said, nah, I don't have any floss, right? So they give you a number, and when we get to the Montage, and they basically say, hey, just text this number if you need anything. You just text it. You need to go somewhere, you need something, you just text this number. So I'm like, okay, it's about 11 o'clock at night. And I'm like, I pull it up and I'm like, hey, is there a person there? Right? Like, I'd love some floss. I'm telling you, knock, knock, knock on the door. Like 2 minutes later, there's a guy there. He has floss. Mr. Nichols, did you need some floss? And I was like, wow.
I picture him being like on his way there being like, what do we got, a floss emergency here? I mean, come on, 11 o'clock at night.
I'm telling you, it was like, it's just a different experience. Overall, everyone there knew my name, right? I mean, I think they know all the guest names when they're coming in. Like, it just felt like I went and got a drink, got an old fashioned. Mixologist is like shaking my hand. Hey, I'm going to be your mixologist today, and let's talk about the different bourbons that we can put it. I mean, I know that they're upselling me too, right? But it's just,
how do you get these cushy gigs? They don't do any of this at the Residence Inn. I'm like,
well, what's funny is before this gig, you were like, hey, you need to look up where you're going, because frankly, I don't always look up where we're going because we're going a lot of places, right? And I looked it up and I was like, oh my gosh, where are we? This is an awesome resort. So anyway, now I'm thinking I want to go back and bring the kids. They have, fishing. They have golf. It's supposedly an amazing course. They have alligators on the banks. And I'm like, well, what about the kids fishing on the banks? This is what I was thinking.
Or little pets.
Like
when I think about my kids going, they're so devious. I'd be like, I'm not telling them about the text line because I can imagine them getting my phone and texting for gummy bears or something late night.
I'm telling you, man. He was like, you need anything, you text this number. And then someone was there. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there because Montage, there's a bunch of resorts. And if I had to choose between Montage and staying at the Ritz-Carlton, it wouldn't be a question. It wouldn't even be a question. Their service is impeccable.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Well.
All right. Well, let's get into today's topic. So today's topic's, it's about centers of influence.
I thought you were going to build a bridge from that topic.
There's no bridge.
How?
There's no bridge. I just wanted to share that story because I got a lot of slack online about my Ritz-Carlton experience with the floss. I had people who were saying, oh, wow, must be nice. You need floss at the Ritz-Carlton, right? And then I had some people who stood up for me online. But then I go to the other extreme. I go to the Montage, and they knock it out of the park. So.
You got a lot of people standing up for the guy with the Ritz-Carlton experience. And I would relate it to, our world of service. If you're in financial services and you're servicing clients, there's a difference, in my opinion, of, even when that floss gets delivered to you, there's a difference in getting it quickly and with a smile versus getting it an hour later or with some grumpiness. I mean, if I were, candidly, if I were delivering that floss to you, I'd be a little grumpy about it.
Yeah.
I'd be like, what is this guy?
You probably shouldn't be working at the montage
No, it would be a terrible job
in a
for me.
customer experience or
The
concierge.
whole way I'd be like, oh, God, I got to get up. I mean, I'm sitting here happily on my phone. I got to get up and bring this guy floss. You can't remember?
I will tell you this. Everyone who worked there seemed really happy to be working there. And I think that's interesting too. Like everyone seemed, no one seemed disgruntled. And you experience that in customer service all the time. But yeah, as an advisor, what's the bridge? I mean, the bridge is that client experience really does matter. People take notice. They can tell the difference. I think the speed of delivery is really important. Like you said, like it's like, yeah, I got it 2 hours later or something. It's like, no, you get it now.
So today we're going to take a little bit of a different spin on the call today. We're going to talk about centers of influence and how, if you're not getting business from them currently, even though you feel like you have some decent partners, how you can spark some referral life into that relationship.
Yeah, common question we get from financial professionals. I send referrals to centers of influence. I don't get anything back. Gosh, those relationships don't work. They're one-sided. It's a frustrating topic. When we present to advisors, they say this all the time to us, right? They're like, yeah, those don't work. And you have some who say yes, like a couple of them who are like, yes, that's my primary source of business. But you have plenty of advisors who, they have some strong opinions around this topic.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there are two parts of this. We, from a marketing standpoint, people come to us often for marketing advice. We think, well, how can we get more referrals out of it? But almost all of you have relationships with other professionals, first and foremost, to provide those experts to your clients. Mm-hmm. Like oftentimes your clients need your recommendations for accountants or attorneys or other professionals. And for that reason alone, you have to embark on this journey to find some of the best experts in the area and refer them out to your clients in a way that helps the client get the services that they need. Now, going above and beyond that, if you're already in contact with these people, we'd love for there to be some reciprocity in terms of referrals.
Right.
So that's kind of where we're headed today. You all have inroads in some way, shape, or form with other professionals. Let's see if we can spark some referrals out of it.
Yeah. So how do we handle this situation where they're not reciprocating? I've sent them referrals and nothing's coming back. We're going to give you 3 different ways to go about handling that today. I think the method that you choose depends upon your relationship with that center of influence. It depends upon kind of conversations heretofore with that center of influence and your personality as well. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And let's acknowledge one thing. Kevin, you mentioned in front of audiences, we get different reactions when talking about this topic. One of the common threads is that there's a lot of people there who are in some sense of complacency with, let's say, for example, I'm a financial advisor and you're an attorney, an estate attorney. And when a client asks me for a recommendation or when I see a need, I would refer them to you. And I've done so for years. I do so out of a place of comfort that I know you're going to treat them well, you're good at what you do, and I sense a fit here, so I make that connection. There's nothing inherently flawed with that. It's okay, but there's more that is possible, and that part can be frustrating. If I'm in a room with other financial professionals and they're getting a lot of referrals from the same kind of dynamic they have in their own community, that's annoying to me. I'm like, well, how come he or she doesn't refer me business? Right? Yet, we see time after time after time there being not just months of stagnancy here, but years and years of that relationship that's just not as fruitful as it could be.
Right.
So, when we teach this philosophy, we say, hey, when you're working on partnerships with other professionals, we've got to know them personally and professionally. You've got to put some effort in, take them to lunch, invite them to your client events, let them learn about your business, so on and so forth. And through a lot of those efforts, if they're not panning out, it gets even more frustrating because you're putting in effort and it's just not happening for you.
Right. Exactly.
So, we've always said, and we don't mean to be like crass or short-sighted about this, but, if you're in a partnership like this that's just not panning out, sometimes the answer is it's time to move on.
Right.
And that's the most dramatic step we'll talk about today. It's just that, you know what? I've tried this with Kevin for so long. If it were going to work, it would have worked already. let's move on.
Yeah, there's some other professional out there who will reciprocate. And I like your point about like we get comfortable, the advisor gets comfortable because I know that you're going to do a good job and you're reliable in terms of, communication when I send someone to you. And so it's just easy, but we might have to move on. But let's talk about before we move on, before we make that decision.
Which is almost never our recommendation. We almost never would say, just move on. Don't even acknowledge it with them. Don't have that conversation. Move on. No, because you've invested some energy into this. You'd like to see if there's some potential payoff.
Yeah, we're not going to break up with them just yet. We're gonna give them a shot here. So we're going to walk through some ways to do that. And the first method today that we're going to recommend is what we refer to as the under the hood meeting. What does that mean, Stephen? The under the hood meeting.
When we look at the reasons why someone would refer or would not, there's a personal side of do I like you and want to help you out? And there's the professional side of do I think highly of the services that you offer? We're in an industry where we all say the same thing. I've mentioned this so many times, but the newest advisor and the most senior of successful advisors say relatively similar things.
Provide comprehensive financial planning and
Yeah. And we see that a ton through our work in copywriting for financial professionals. When you ask them what separates them from the competition, they all say relatively similar things. Now, because we all, and that's not a bad thing, by the way. I mean, we all take pride in the service we deliver, our investment acumen, and so forth. But we say relatively similar things. From the ears of a center of influence, if you're the accountant or attorney and you're hearing those things, how do you know truthfully who is better than the others?
Right.
The under the hood meeting, long way of getting here, but the under the hood meeting is me showing you what I do for clients in a way that shows you it's different. So it's not just telling you we do A, B, and C for clients. I'm going to bring you under the hood and let you see maybe under the hood or behind the scenes.
Ooh, that's good too.
Yeah.
A BTS meeting.
Yeah, behind the scenes of, I mentioned I have a team. Why don't you meet these people?
Yeah.
I mentioned that we have technology that streamlines a lot of this. Why don't I show you that technology?
Right. So you could bring them in over a lunch and you could cater lunch and you say, hey, let's walk through a sample financial plan that we work on with a client.
So what's what would be the setup for that, Kevin? Like what would you say to them in order to set up a behind the scenes meeting?
I think that would be one where you would call up that center of influence and you would say something like, hey, I was thinking the other day, I've never really had a chance to kind of walk you through how we work with new clients, and I'd love to get your input on a few things as well. Can we grab lunch next week, maybe in our office? And I just want to show you some of the tools that we leverage when we're meeting with new clients. I would try and keep it pretty informal, at least the invite, because I don't want them to be like, oh gosh, this is going to be a lot of work on my part, but just, hey, I never had a chance to show you kind of how we work with clients directly.
And you might also mention, by the way, I'd love to have the opposite take place as well. I'd love to sit through your process at some point.
That's good.
Just showing some curiosity there. Now, the connection to this is, if they know more about your process, hopefully they're more likely to recommend you. Would you go any further than that though, Kevin, in terms of, let's say I'm the advisor, you're the other professional, and you're in my office, you're witnessing my process. Is there anything you would say if you're me that's a little bit more on the nose, that's a little bit more of like, hey, we want more business coming from this, like without saying it exactly that way?
Yeah, I think there's a part during that meeting where you could talk about your ideal client profile, where you could at least paint the picture for them. Hey, these are the types of scenarios where it makes sense to bring us in, right, that we see most often. And I think that's probably the way that I would put it. And a lot of advisors who hold these under the hood meetings put together some sort of PowerPoint deck. And I'm not saying like 30 slides. I'm talking like 10, right? And maybe one of the slides towards the end is, common scenarios where we're brought in or our average client and what they look like.
Or just case studies even.
Case studies. Yeah. Yep. I like that a lot. So yeah, I think there's a place to put it there. I don't think this is a, hey, by the way, you need to be referring me business conversation. But the concept itself, we've had advisors in our coaching program who have implemented this concept. And I remember one of them, he said, this is my client, Dan, from years ago, and great guy. I worked with this advisor for a long time. He had a CPA who didn't refer. He was about ready to write him off. And I said, hey, Dan, can we do an under the hood meeting? And we went through the concept and he was like, okay, cool. I'll do that. I'll give it a shot. And at the end of that meeting with that CPA, under the hood meeting, the CPA says, my wife and I need this. We need it. We need, and he became a client, right? Which he ended up turning into a better advocate in that sense. And that's not the overarching like goal here, but the goal is more of like the idea that referrals are scary things. When you refer another provider, you're putting your reputation on the line. So when they're referring you, they got to feel really comfortable with the experience. And that's what this is about, getting them really, really comfortable with what that's going to look like when I refer my client over to Stephen Boswell.
So I think you would describe this one as one of the softer approaches to try to get more business out of someone else.
Right.
Right. So again, I'm the advisor, you're the other professional. This is one way, in addition to me taking you to lunch every now and then, having you to my client events, this is one way to try to warm you up to sending me business, stopping short of anything that's overly direct, saying that, I want you to refer me more. What gives?
Yeah. I mean, when we talk to most advisors about this concept, I mean, we do talk about that personal relationship and how important that is. But just as important too is them feeling like you're going to take care of their clients and do a really good job. And I think sometimes advisors go almost overboard with just the relationship side of it. And I've seen it. I've worked with clients who like, gosh, they're sending small gifts to CPAs constantly. They're doing fun of it. They're sending a masseuse during tax time. They're doing all this, cool things. But the professional side, they're not working on.
The substance aspect of it.
Yeah. And a lot of these professionals, I mean, think about the average CPA, this kind of very, detail-oriented type personality. They also want to make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
Yeah. I was thinking in advance of this call about, I'd like to draw analogies around some of this. And so often it goes into, this is a relationship. Business, is there an analogy with dating? Is there an analogy with building friendships? And the key difference in this is that there is a professional side of it.
Yeah.
It's not all about, can we get along over lunch? Can I trust you with my clients? And what you described here is, a good way to go about that.
Yeah. I mean, I say this line a lot during presentations, that referrals are scary things. And I got that from a client of mine down in Southern California, this guy named Joe, who did a lot of work with COIs. And he would say, I got to get them comfortable. And I got to get them in the office. I got to think about that client experience and how I wow them. And it will make you think about that, by the way. Like they're coming into your office, now you're thinking, oh my gosh, how do we greet them? Do we go ahead and get lunch orders in advance? How's the team dressed that day? It makes you think about that experience.
And it's not only what you cover, but how you cover it. So if you can imagine, you come into my office, you're an estate attorney, and you come in to see my process. If my language between me and my team and explaining what I do is super heavy in terms of our sales meetings, the prospects that we're in front of, our marketing efforts, we're if you get that sense about me, it's one thing. If I am much more about, here's how we've been able to help people.
That's it.
Here's some of what we've been able to accomplish with our clients. Here's how rewarding this career path is for me. You feel a little bit differently about my passion for what I do.
Agreed.
It
needs to be client focused.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that'd be like number one. So right now you have a center of influence and you're thinking, gosh, I've sent referrals. I'm not getting anything back. This relationship feels really one-sided. Our recommendation typically is let's do an under the hood meeting.
Absolutely. All right. What's next? Number two.
Number two. So the second option. Now, the second option we're going to talk about today is going to be probably right up your alley, Stephen, because I do think it depends upon your personality. I mean, for me, I'd be doing under the hood meetings, is more of a frank conversation.
And I think this is partly to do with personality, but partly along the continuum of where you are in the relationship. Let's say that you've already exhausted some of these things. I've had the under the hood meeting.
Okay.
I've sent you a lot of business.
Okay. Yep.
I'm about ready to move on.
Right. Yeah. Let's talk about you know what? At some point, I just need to, what's that Southern expression of putting the skunk on the table? And I need to say, hey, what gives?
Yeah, because I don't want that to be perceived as something that you can only do if you're a very direct person.
That's true.
Because there are ways to do it. Like I remember, Matt Oxley. Matt was in here for a little while this morning. It was good catching up with him. He did a webinar, and I enjoyed listening into a little bit of that. And his personality when he presents was always known as being like, I'm kind of direct. He's very direct.
Yes.
Right? Very pleasant. People love him, but he's a very direct guy.
Yeah. People used to always say like, "Hey, was he in the military? Was he like a sergeant in the military?" I'm like, "No, he wasn't. That's just him. That's just how he is."
And so people would hear him explain this concept back in the day, and he would explain it in a way that he would. His personality would be such that he would say, if he's the advisor, you're the accountant, he would say, "Hey, so what gives? You're not, I mean, I'm looking out for you, sending you business. Are you going to ever have any for me?"
Yeah.
And he can pull that off with a smile on his face, with good energy, to where he's not alienating most people. But when you hear that style, you're like, that's not me.
Yeah.
That's not how I would say it.
Yeah.
I think there's a way to be direct but polite in this. And so let's role play this a little bit. Let's say that I take you to lunch and I'm the advisor. I want more business from you, the accountant. There's a way for me to say, I think there's more possible here. What do you think about that? Right? So maybe I soft play that by saying, "Hey, I know we've been on the lookout for you this year. I'm trying to find anybody I can that is a business owner who may have a little bit more complexity than the individual tax returns at the end of the year, and I've got a couple I'm still working on for you." But I was thinking, I want to make sure you have an idea of who we work with, because I'm sure there's some people that you run across. I mean, is that accurate? Do you ever run across people who have a need for providers like me? And I'm in a very, very nice way. I'm asking you.
You're good with the language. I mean, that is good. And I like that you brought it up about, like, you preface it a little bit with like, "Hey, we've been trying to look out for these situations for you. Curious, have I done a good job of like explaining the situations where it would make sense to bring us in?" But I like that a lot. There's a softer way to kind of go about it.
I'm trying to arrive at the truth here. And ultimately, is there a situation where this is possible? And what are your feelings about referring out like that?
Yeah.
So I might say, are there times where you run across people that you think might have a need for people like me? What do you do in those scenarios?
Right.
Because I want to know, obviously you're not sending them to me or we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Right.
Is it your company policy that you don't refer out? Is it that everybody gets referred to a list of 5 vendors?
That's what
and
I was
we're on the
going to
bottom?
say. Here's 3 people, right?
Yeah. There's something happening here.
There is.
And I want to get to the bottom of it. If ultimately I find out that you're just never going to refer to me, I'm not going to be rude about it, but I'm probably not going to put a lot of effort into this anymore.
What if I'm the CPA in that scenario and I say, "Well, actually, my brother-in-law, he works for XYZ firm, so a lot of times I send business their way."
Yeah.
Right? Or I refer it. That might be a sign that it is time to move on.
Yeah, I might be checking my watch.
You're not buying me lunch. At that point.
Like we're splitting this.
Yeah. 2 separate checks, please. Yeah.
But that's really what I'm after. And if your personality is direct, you might say, "Hey, is there ever a chance you're going to refer to me? What do you have on the horizon here?"
Right.
And if you're less than direct, I think it's okay. You just want to get to the bottom of it. You don't want to play it so soft that you don't find out the truth.
Yeah, I like that. We need to figure out the truth. Now, we're saying that this is a point where maybe you have exhausted the under the hood. You've done some other things, but you're going to have a conversation with them. Now, can I text them this? Can I email them this?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
No. You have to realize when I mentioned it's a continuum, and this is well down the path a little bit, right? Because there's a risk here, and this does relate back to building friendships or dating, that if I'm overly direct here, it may be a little bit off-putting. You may not want to hang out with me anymore.
Right.
Right?
Right.
If it's like, "Hey, Kevin, I've reached out to you. I mean, I've tried to hang out with you a few times. What's your problem?" Like, you're kind of like, this is the problem. Like, this is why we're not hanging out.
That's true.
But the same with if you're over the top with this of like, who can you refer me? Who are you working with right now that would be a good fit for us? You may think this is kind of the end of the road for us.
Right. Yeah.
So let's say that theoretically, let's say that conversation goes well. What does a best case scenario look like in that conversation?
The best case scenario, in my opinion, would be actually, I have a few people I want to introduce you to, like today or tomorrow.
like your admission that like I could be better at this.
Right.
I have a few people I could be, lining you up with. Or,
or you know what, we haven't done a good job of really looking for that, and I can do a better job of that. Like that's probably what you're hoping comes out of this.
Yeah, maybe even a brainstorm session at the end of that meeting where it's like, sometimes client events are a nice and easy way to put us in front of people, or that we do something educational. Yeah. We co-present something where I bring some clients and you do too.
And the other side of it, if you find out, like I said, their brother-in-law is in the business, you find out that, we have a policy where we don't refer, right? Or whatever, it's like, that's good too, that you found that out. And I know that sometimes we don't want to know that stuff just because we want to keep going and, and keeping things how they were. But it's good that you know that, because now you can go out and find a professional who will reciprocate.
Yeah, there's no emergency there in terms of I'm never referring them ever again.
Right.
But you're certainly exploring some other options at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So option number 2 is the frank conversation. I say frank. I mean, I think you had some really good language today that you shared, Stephen. Like you said, Matt Oxley, being from White Plains, New York, he'd be like, "Hey, what gives, man? Hey, what?" And he would be able to do it with a pat on the back and like you said, a twinkle in his eye. And it just, the bottom line is we want the truth.
Matt would do it. Here's my guess of how he would do it. He would say something like, "Hey, Kevin, tell me, give me some examples of some of the families you're working with nowadays. Like, what's a really good client for you nowadays?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he would let you explain it for a second, let you brag on some of the size of relationships and complexities you're working on. He'd be like, those are some of the people that we'd love to meet. How do we go about?
That's not a bad approach.
Yeah, it's not
a bad approach. Okay. So now we're going to get to number 3. Now, number 3 is more of an annual review. Okay. And this concept has come out of some coaching that we have done in the past with advisors who have crushed it with centers of influence. And it's an annual review with that center of influence where you're going to walk through mutual clients.
So let's say in this situation, it's probably one where you have referred a client or two back and forth. You wouldn't do this with somebody who's never referred.
Right.
So we've referred a little bit of business together, but I think there's more potential. I may call you, if I'm the advisor, I may call you and say, "Hey, I find it helpful once a year for us to get together. I've done this with a couple of other partners to hear what you're working on with clients nowadays, to share with you what we're doing, some trends in our industry, and just to catch up on some mutual clients." Would you be open to that?
Mm-hmm. And it could be a dinner.
Yeah.
It could be a lunch. It could be just a meeting in the office.
Yeah. And really what we're after here is, I think, true to form, I think it would be helpful for me to understand some trends happening in your industry.
Mm-hmm.
If you're an accountant, I benefit from learning things that are happening in your field that I can talk about with clients in some way.
Right.
And vice versa for you. But selfishly, from a marketing standpoint, I want to go over some of the clients that I've sent to you in the past, separate from the clients that you've sent me, because I want to draw attention to the fact that I'm sending you more business than you're sending me back.
Right. Without saying it, like, "Hey, by the way, I've sent you 10 people, you've sent me 2. Right. But you're going to, and we've seen advisors who've done it a few ways, right? Like you said, even like a notebook, right? On one page, you'd have, "Hey, clients that we've referred you. Let's go through the Smiths and the Joneses." And then you flip over that page. On the other side, it's clients that they've referred, and there's an obvious discrepancy. So you don't have to necessarily say, and like, "Woo, look at the difference here between what you've sent and what I've sent."
Yeah. You don't have to be over the top with it, because again, this is someone who has referred you in the past. You treat them like gold. You want to see more of this happen, but you want to nudge them a little bit. Mm-hmm. Complacency here isn't a good thing for you. You want to nudge them. Hey, what else? I mean, how else could we be better partnering this year?
Yeah.
It's okay to do that over a dinner like that.
Yeah.
I mean, the good thing is when you're in that scenario, you've got somebody who's proven to refer. You obviously like each other at least a little bit. Let's press the pace on this a little bit. I find that, most accountants and most attorneys aren't nearly as marketing minded as most advisors.
That's it. And you're kind of, you're drawing attention to it, and they're probably not even thinking about it. You're over here thinking about it, stewing over it, hey, like the discrepancy. They're not even thinking about it, right? And so like what you're doing in a subtle way is kind of showing them that. And most of the advisors that we work with who've implemented this type of strategy, sometimes they walk away from those dinners or those annual reviews with some referrals, right? With some people that, you know what? I have some people I need to be introducing you to.
Yeah, that's you think about ideal outcome from that meeting. That's what it is.
That's it.
Some immediate business.
Yeah. I shared that strategy a couple of weeks ago. I was in Boston meeting with some teams, and this was the common question was, "Hey, we have centers of influence, they're not reciprocating." And so I shared this annual review strategy with a few of them, and you could just see the light bulb go off in the advisor's head. Like, "Oh my gosh, we should be doing that. That makes so much sense." Just showing them kind of the difference without saying, "Whoa, look, I'm sending more." But it's doing it in a more professional way.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're thinking about measurables here, how many of these lunches and dinners are you having every year? How many times are you referring somebody to your professional partners? We're always looking for measurables. Those are things that if you were to examine it at the end of any given year and you say, this year we had more one-on-one meetings over lunch and dinner, we had more under the hood meetings, we had more referrals going outbound, I would be willing to bet that on the flip side of that, you also got more referrals inbound.
Agreed.
Just effort.
So start measuring these things. Like, so saying, hey, you know what, after tax season this year, we're gonna do 3 under the hood meetings. Right. And then we're going to start implementing annual reviews towards the end of the year. Like there's things that you could put into place pretty much immediately.
Absolutely. If you need help with that, coaching, Oxley Coaching is where it's at. Our coaches have been around the industry. They've worked on this topic so many times with so many different advisors all across the U.S. and Canada.
Yep.
That they're going to help you put a little bit more structure to something like this. Now, you don't have to have a coach to operate on what we're talking about today. But I think with any marketing initiative you're working towards, if you've got somebody pressing the pace, helping push you a little bit, providing you with some creative ideas, certainly not going to hurt.
Yeah, and we're giving you some like broad stroke advice. Coaching is, let's talk about that person, and there's so much nuance there in that relationship, right? It's a different type of experience.
It is. It's kind of like, well, that's a good idea, Kevin, but we've never had lunch before. Would it be weird if we had dinner?
Exactly.
Or,
exactly.
That sort of thing.
Yeah. So, and that to me is the situational aspect of coaching to me is always the most valuable. So if you want to talk about that, we're always open. Just go to our website and check out coaching.
That's it. Thanks, everybody. That was episode number 114 of the Stephen and Kevin Show.
We're on it.
Thanks for joining us.